Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand.
Nelson Mandela is remembered across the world as a freedom fighter, a president, and a symbol of justice. His name is written into history books, his story taught to generations. But behind the legend was a man with a family, 6 children, 17 grandchildren, and nearly 20 great-grandchildren. And while the world knows the leader, few know what became of the father's children. Some followed him into public life as diplomats, activists, and politicians. Others chose quieter paths, far from the glare of history. So, whatever happened to Nelson Mandela's kids? This is the untold story of the family behind the icon. Long before the world knew the name Nelson Mandela, he was just Rolihlahla Mandela, a boy born on July 18, 1918, in the small village of Mveso in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa, was a local chief, and his mother, Nonkafi Nosekeni, raised him in the traditions of the Thembu people. Mandela grew up herding cattle, listening to stories around the fire, and learning about leadership through custom and community. But his life was marked by loss early on. His father died when he was only 12 years old, and young Rolihlahla was sent to live with the acting Thembu regent, Chief Ndaba Dalindyebo, who became a guardian and role model. It was in this household that Mandela first witnessed both the authority of leadership and the responsibilities that came with it. Years later, Mandela would say, "To be the father of a nation is a great honor, but to be the father of a family is a greater joy." Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to enjoy the latter. It was a powerful admission. His devotion to the struggle against apartheid and his 27 years in prison came at a heavy personal cost, a cost paid not just by him, but by his children. In 1944, Nelson Mandela married his first wife, Evelyn Ntoko Mace, a nurse and cousin of Walter Sisulu, one of Mandela's closest friends and political allies. Together they had 4 children, though tragedy would strike more than once. Their firstborn son, Madiba Thembekile, known as Thembi, arrived in 1945. He was just 24 when he died in a car crash in 1969, while his father was still imprisoned on Robben Island. The apartheid government would not allow Mandela to attend the funeral. For Mandela, it was one of the most painful consequences of his long imprisonment, being denied the chance to say goodbye to his own child. Their second child, a daughter named Makaziwe, was born in 1948, but died at only 9 months old. It was a devastating loss for the young couple. In 1950, they welcomed another son, Makgatho Lewanika Mandela. He became a lawyer, continuing in some ways the family's tradition of public service. But in 2005, Makgatho died at age 54 from an AIDS-related illness. Instead of hiding the cause, Nelson Mandela spoke openly, using the tragedy to challenge the stigma. He said, "Let us give publicity to HIV/AIDS and not hide it, because the only way of making it appear to be a normal illness like TB, like cancer, is always to come out and say somebody has died because of HIV." And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. The couple's last child together, Pumla Makaziwe, known as Maki, Mandela, was born in 1954, named in memory of her sister. She is the only surviving child from Mandela's marriage to Evelyn. Maki went on to become a businesswoman, academic, and public speaker, often addressing issues of race, gender, and equality. By the mid-1950s, the strain of Mandela's political activism and long absences took its toll on the marriage. Nelson and Evelyn divorced in 1958, but their children, Thembi, Makgatho, Makaziwe, and Maki, would always remain part of Mandela's complicated legacy as a father. In 1958, the same year Mandela divorced Evelyn, he married Winnie Madikizela, who would become known worldwide as Winnie Mandela, a fierce anti-apartheid activist and a controversial figure in her own right. Their marriage produced 2 daughters, both of whom would play important roles in South Africa's story. The first, Zenani Mandela Dlamini, was born in 1959. Educated at Boston University in the United States, she later became a respected diplomat. Zenani served as South Africa's ambassador to Argentina and later to South Korea. She married Prince Thumbamuzi Dlamini of Swaziland, now Eswatini, and became a princess by marriage. The couple had 4 children, Zaziwe, Zamaswazi, Zinle, and Zozuko. Zenani continues to represent South Africa on the global stage, carrying her father's legacy into international diplomacy. The second daughter, Zindziswa, or Zindzi, Mandela, was born in 1960, just a year before her father was sentenced to life in prison. As a child and young woman, Zindzi bore much of the weight of her father's absence. In 1985, she stood before a global audience and read Nelson Mandela's historic letter rejecting then-President P.W. Botha's conditional release, an act of defiance that cemented her place in history. Zindzi was also a poet, activist, and later a diplomat, serving as South Africa's ambassador to Denmark. She had 4 children of her own, Zoleka, Zondwa, Bambatha, and Zwelabo. But Zindzi's life was not without struggle. In July 2020, she passed away at the age of 59, leaving behind a legacy of courage and outspoken activism. Through Zenani and Zindzi, Nelson and Winnie's marriage produced daughters who each, in their own way, embodied elements of their parents: diplomacy and defiance, public service and protest. Their stories highlight both the opportunities and the burdens of carrying the Mandela name. Nelson Mandela's legacy did not end with his children. Through his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the Mandela name has carried into new generations, each carving their own path, some in public life, others in private. From his first marriage to Evelyn Mace came grandchildren like Ndileka Mandela, the eldest granddaughter born in 1965 to Thembi. A nurse and activist, she has been outspoken about health issues and the responsibilities of the Mandela name. Her sister, Nandi Mandela, born in 1968, has also been active in business and community work. Through Makgatho came 4 sons, Mandla, Ndaba, Mbuso, and Andile. Of these, Mandla Mandela, born in 1974, took on a particularly visible role as a chief in the Thembu Royal Council and as a member of parliament in South Africa. His brothers have taken more private or varied paths, though the Mandela name continues to draw attention to their choices. From Pumla Makaziwe, known as Maki, came 3 children, Tukwini, Dumani, and Kweku, who have pursued careers in business and creative fields, often with a focus on African identity and heritage. Through Winnie's daughters came even more descendants. Zenani's 4 children, Zaziwe, Zamaswazi, Zinle, and Zozuko Dlamini, continue the Mandela line within the Swazi royal family. And Zindzi's 4 children, Zoleka, Zondwa, Bambatha, and Zwelabo, have also stepped into public view at times. Perhaps the most outspoken was Zoleka Mandela, an author and activist who wrote candidly about her struggles with addiction, cancer, and personal trauma. She became a voice for health awareness and women's empowerment in South Africa until her passing in 2023. All told, Nelson Mandela left behind 6 children, 17 grandchildren, and at least 19 great-grandchildren. Some carry the Mandela name into politics, activism, or culture. Others live quietly, far from the spotlight. Together they reflect the complexity of inheriting not just a family legacy, but the name of one of the most iconic figures in modern history. When Nelson Mandela walked free from prison in 1990, the world celebrated the man who would become South Africa's first democratic president. But his release also placed new attention on his family, who had lived for decades in his shadow. Some of Mandela's children and grandchildren stepped directly into public roles. Mandla Mandela, the eldest son of Makgatho, became chief of the Mveso Traditional Council in the Eastern Cape, carrying both political authority and cultural responsibility. He also entered Parliament, representing the ruling African National Congress. But his career has not been without controversy, with disputes over family matters and his leadership style making headlines. Zenani Mandela Dlamini, Mandela's daughter with Winnie, rose to prominence in diplomacy. She served as ambassador to Argentina and later South Korea, representing South Africa abroad and reinforcing the Mandela name as a symbol of global respect. Her sister, Zindzi Mandela, followed a similar path, serving as ambassador to Denmark until her death in 2020. Decades earlier, she had become a symbol of resistance when she read Mandela's letter refusing conditional release. Among the grandchildren, Ndileka Mandela, Thembi's eldest daughter, became a nurse and later an outspoken activist. She has spoken about sexual violence, women's rights, and the weight of growing up with the Mandela name. Ndaba Mandela, another grandson, co-founded the Mandela Institute for Humanity, promoting youth leadership and keeping his grandfather's message alive for a new generation. Even outside politics and diplomacy, the Mandela family has often found itself in the public eye, sometimes in celebration, sometimes in controversy. But whether through activism, government, or cultural work, many of Mandela's descendants have chosen to step into the arena, continuing in their own ways the fight for justice, equality, and dignity. Being the child of Nelson Mandela has never been simple. For decades, while the world hailed him as a hero, his family lived with the personal sacrifices that came with his mission. Mandela spent 27 years behind bars. During that time, his children grew up largely without him. Birthdays, graduations, even funerals passed without their father present. When his son Thembi died in a car crash in 1969, Mandela was not permitted to attend the funeral. That absence marked his children deeply, and even in freedom, the years of separation could never be undone. When Mandela was released in 1990, the world expected him to lead South Africa into democracy, and he did. But the demands of politics again pulled him away from family. He himself admitted, "To be the father of a nation is a great honor, but to be the father of a family is a greater joy." Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to enjoy the latter. That tension shaped the lives of his descendants. Some embraced the Mandela name, using it as a platform. Zenani and Zindzi became diplomats. Ndaba Mandela co-founded the Mandela Institute for Humanity. Mandla Mandela took on a traditional chieftaincy and a seat in parliament. Others, like Makaziwe Mandela, pursued business and academia, engaging with issues of race and gender. But the Mandela name has also carried controversy. Family disputes over leadership, inheritance, and even the right to Mandela's final resting place have made headlines in South Africa. Some relatives struggled with addiction, financial difficulties, or public scrutiny. Carrying the Mandela legacy meant not just honor, but pressure. For many in the family, there has been a constant push and pull between private identity and public expectation, between individual choices and collective history. Some descendants leaned into the spotlight, others withdrew from it completely. At its core, the story of Mandela's children and grandchildren reveals the personal cost of leadership. Their lives remind us that while Nelson Mandela became a global icon, at home he was also a man, and his family bore both the pride and the pain of his extraordinary journey. Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. The world mourned a global hero, but for his family, it was the loss of a father and grandfather. His daughter Makaziwe Mandela, the only surviving child from his first marriage to Evelyn Muz, later reflected, "My father was not an icon at home. He was Dad. He had a sense of humor, he loved telling stories, and he always reminded us that humility was more important than fame. Today, Maki is a businesswoman and academic, continuing to speak on issues of identity, race, and Africa's place in the modern world. Zenani Mandela Dlamini, his daughter with Winnie, has remained active in diplomacy. She has served as South Africa's ambassador to Argentina and South Korea, often echoing her father's lesson. Diplomacy is not about showing power. It is about showing respect. The memory of Zindzi Mandela, who passed away in 2020, lives on through her children. Her daughter, Zoleka Mandela, an outspoken author and activist, wrote candidly about her battles with cancer, addiction, and personal trauma. In one of her last interviews, she said, "My grandfather taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. That is the legacy I want to leave to my children." Zoleka passed away in 2023, but her voice remains an inspiration for women's rights and health advocacy in South Africa. Among the grandchildren, Mandla Mandela continues as a traditional chief and serves in parliament, while Ndaba Mandela leads the Mandela Institute for Humanity, working to inspire a new generation of young African leaders. Ndaba has often repeated his grandfather's advice. It is not enough to dream of a better world, we must build it with our daily actions. Even outside politics, the family remains engaged. Ndileka Mandela, Thembi's daughter, and Mandela's eldest granddaughter, has become a strong voice on women's rights and public health. In her words, the Mandela name is not just a legacy, it is a responsibility. The story of Mandela's children and grandchildren is one of both pride and difficulty, of public achievements and private struggles. It reminds us that behind the icon stood a man of flesh and blood, and a family who inherited not just his name, but the weight and the glory of his fight. Today, Mandela's descendants live across diplomacy, politics, activism, and private life. Each, in their own way, keeps alive the flame of the man who showed the world that freedom is worth any sacrifice. As Mandela once said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." Through his children and grandchildren, that message continues to rise, carried forward into the future. So, whatever happened to Nelson Mandela's kids? Some became diplomats, others activists, politicians, or traditional leaders. Some lived quietly, far from the spotlight. Together they carried the weight of his name, sometimes as a source of pride, sometimes as a heavy burden. His children and grandchildren are living proof of both the sacrifices he made and the legacy he left behind. From Zenani representing South Africa abroad, to Ndaba inspiring young leaders, to Zoleka's brave fight for women's health, the Mandela family continues to reflect the values of resilience, justice, and hope. Nelson Mandela may be gone, but his story lives on, not just in history books, but in the lives of his children, his grandchildren, and the generations that follow. And now we want to hear from you. Which story from Mandela's family touched you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of the families behind the legends